Bruce, how much oil do you think is aboard the Rena?
I think that there is about 1,000 tonnes that we know of, we can confirm, and there's about 365 that we have a strong indication is there, but that's not perfect science.
Bruce, can you just explain how you're going to take the fuel oil off Rena tomorrow? How is it going to be the same as the pumping out you've tried the other day, or is it a whole different process?
It's similar but different, if that's okay to say. They'll go in through that manhole cover, but they're going to be operating outside. The ship's engines and power system is no longer available, which means that the oil can't be heated. So they have to use a different process, and they're going to use an Archimedes pump. If you think about a screw, it uses the screw to effectively pump up the Marmite into the hoses, and then they can get that off and into the Awanuia. Conscious that you all wanted some images of people being put onto the vessel, Svitzer have arranged from their drop this morning a series of images and footage that will be available for you to have access on in loading the first crew onto the vessel. And I know that we arranged also some time for you to have a look at the platforms. Tomorrow, weather permitting, there will be an opportunity for once again a pool chopper to go out and have a look at the platforms as they've been set up and to see how that operation will actually occur.
Is there any way of taking a guess at if it does start operating tomorrow, how long it's going to take to get those 1,000 tonnes out?
What they'll do is they're going to focus first of all on port number 5, and they're going to aim for the 770 tonnes. While they're doing that, they're going to go and look at the settling tanks, the 2 which have got about 110 each in it. They're going to pump those into number 5, and then they're going to go and do what they call as hot tap into the starboard number 5. When the hot tap, they effectively have the side of the tank, and they bolt on a flange, and then they drill through the flange, and then they use that to seal off, and then they can start pumping out. They've got all that equipment here in New Zealand. It was all in the warehouse. I was looking at it this afternoon. So as soon as they can start those processes, they're going to do it. Hot tapping's not easy, especially in that place. They'll be right down in the engine room where their means of escape are quite limited. So they'll do that once they're sure the vessel's settled. I haven't answered your question. No. How many hours? I don't know.
Will it take days or months?
Days. It's more of the days rather than the weeks.
What happens if the stern of the ship splits apart, leaves the rest of the vessel? Is this system that you've set up going to assist in future pumping?
No. If the vessel broke up, now remembering that it's less likely. The vessel is sitting quite nicely on the reef. So you're talking about a hypothetical to start with. Yeah. But if the hypothetical work occurred and the vessel slipped off, then they would be able to go in and do the hot tapping process. Now they would have to have saturation divers and the like, really deep sea divers to come in and do it probably from the outside of the hull and go through that way. But they can do it, and they've done it in other operations all around the world.
Platforms look pretty basic, aren't they?
Don't need to be pretty.
How dangerous is it to work on?
They have got handrails, and they have got chain around them to stop them. The chain that actually supports them is very strong. They have had them designed properly and checked out to make sure that they're okay. But don't forget, it's a dynamic environment. The biggest issue is that the vessel is effectively disconnected, and it's still grinding and moving. Not a lot, but it's still grinding and moving. So yeah, it's a risky operation. And as I described this morning, they actually choreograph. They actually know who's doing exactly what bit of the system and who's got what role. They harness them into the vessel while they're down on those platforms, once again, so they don't, and they're all wearing full immersion suits to make sure they're really safe as they can.
Can you just tell me where the sealing tanks are in the vessel?
Okay. If we go back to my slide. I'm sure my other colleagues would love questions as well. Sorry, I meant the one with the U-shaped tanks. There we go. So if you see where it says centre line, what they have is, because they have the engine basically in the middle of in the centre line, they have two large tanks of about 111 tonnes. Well, these ones have got 111 tonnes in them. So they're right in the pointer is underneath. It's not a dictaphone this time. So
It's light switch on the side of the switch.
yeah, it's on there. So just quite like this one. You see it? The central, there it is on the centre line. The settling tanks are around there on either side. And you can, when you look at the thermal imagery, they show it really clearly. So you can actually see the tide line and effectively the tide line, meaning where the oil is. You can see that in the thermal imagery. It shows up really clearly. And the same with the settling tanks. Once again, you can see the shape and the location, and that's really good indications that you've got still warm oil in there. The one that we don't know about is number 5 starboard.
So that would be at the front and back?
No, 5 starboard is on the.
Oh, I'm talking about the system tanks.
Oh, so there's 3 tanks pretty much parallel. The settling tanks are slightly further back. 5 port, 5 starboard. Settling tank 1, settling tank 2.
This has been a question that's been asked a lot on News Talk ZB talkback the last couple of days. I know there's been a rotation of some of you guys crew-wise, but how much sleep are you guys getting? I mean, this is a massive operation, but Nick, for example, as on-scene commander, how much sleep are you actually able to get? Bearing in mind you can't be Superman. And your teams, how much sleep? When are you resting? When are you eating? I mean, what's your sort of day like?
Thank you. It's a very interesting point and question, and this is one of the reasons I think we rotate people around a reasonable amount. I rotated in, for instance, on Tuesday. My last meal was McDonald's about 2 o'clock this afternoon. But generally, we really have to look after people. Again, it's back into the emotional and quite a physiological stress, I think, involved, both in the planning side and certainly in the incident command centre. There's a huge amount of hard work going on there. There's a huge amount of physiological stress involved to the field operations where there's a lot of physical stress involved. So it's quite an interesting continuum of stressors and reactions to how everything's being dealt with. The key to it, I think, is once you get momentum and once you're moving forward as a command centre and as a field team, everything takes a bit of a lift. And the secret, I guess, in an organisation sense, is to maintain that lift. So I think we're achieving a little bit of a rhythm now, and that's pretty important to just minimising down the stresses that are involved. Interesting question, thank you very much. And how are we dealing with it? For instance, with the wildlife crew, we're now looking at some programs around counselling and counselling of those who are recovering the dead birds and dead animals, because that does actually really affect people in quite a traumatic way. Oil spills themselves, a lot of energy and effort goes into trying to maintain the capacity of dealing with these oil spills. But certainly a lot of the stress has been relieved, I think, by the very good actions of the public over the last couple of days in terms of both their volunteer status, also the way they're starting to, everyone is starting to respond to the safety message and just keeping clear of activities that we're requesting people generally keep clear of. So there's a great amount of cooperation. I guess it's just relieving the amount of stress that's really on certainly the oil spill response team. The cell wards have quite a different stress load, and certainly it's more in terms of the risk factors around the types and natures of work that they do. Thank you.
Question for Kerry, just in terms of, you said before close to 1,000 birds. Do you have an actual specific number? Or?
I don't have an exact number, but it was 901 first thing this morning,
okay.
And they've been out all day as well collecting. So. And
also in terms of the species sort of breakdown of that 901, is there one species in particular that's sort of over a large percentage of that?
Yes, there's a wide range of species. I think we've got something like 20 to 30 different species that are involved. Most of the birds we're getting through are pelagic species, and pelagic means living out at sea. So they're the animals that are feeding out at sea and are being washed in. The penguins are actually, we've got a lot of live penguins. We don't have a large number of dead penguins, and that's because the way they come in, they're out at sea all day, they come in the evening and they're getting oiled as they come in. That's why we've got the night teams there that are catching those penguins just as they come in, which means that, that we get them before they go back to sea the next day.
And are these close to 1,000 dead birds being collected, or what's sort of the process there?
Yeah, certainly. So as well as the live birds, the teams we've got out on the beaches are collecting all the dead birds they come across. They're being labelled, time, date, place they've been found, and the majority of them are getting, well, we're keeping every single bird, and a lot of them are being post-mortemed as well. We've got a wildlife pathologist on site who's doing necropsies to see, just to make sure they didn't have anything else going on, I guess.
Right, thanks.
Can I ask a question to you? The short damages are for everyone visible. Can you say something about the long-term damages?
Yes, certainly I guess the immediate impact of oil on wildlife is very, very visible. So it's that external effect of oil affecting the plumage, affecting their ability to keep warm and to stay on the water. And there are other effects. There are internal effects of the birds out there that are feeding on contaminated food sources or feeding in areas where there's actually oil and they're ingesting. So sometimes you might not actually see the external effects. But further down the track, there are also, longer-term effects of habitat changes, effects of oil on the food sources, and there are, long-term other impacts that can occur. It's a lot harder to see these impacts, and they are probably going to be something that is looked at longer term